Hey everybody, it's Jonny Bowden. Today I want to talk about vaping. There's been so much stuff in the news about how it's linked to deaths and all these people are vaping and they're dying. And I've actually had even people contact me and say, I think it'd be safer. I should just go back to cigarettes. So let's take a deep breath and see what we really know about this. And I want to start by saying, please don't take anything I'm saying today as an endorsement of vaping. I think vaping's terrible. I think cigarette smoking's terrible. They're both terrible for your health. I'm not talking about morally or any other way. I mean, just in terms of the physiological things that they do to the body, they're not good. So I'm not supporting vaping, but I am asking that we take a step back and ask from a more scientific and objective point of view, what do we really know? And the answer to what we really know is not very much. What we have here is a classic kind of case where things happen together, and there's a natural human tendency to think that when two things happen together, one is causing the other. This goes all the way back to the rain dances. And somebody did a rain dance and it rained, and they go, oh, you made the rain come because you did a rain dance, and then here came the rain. This is a very common error of thinking that a lot of us make. It's very natural. But the fact is that what we really know is that there's a few hundred cases, I think it's up to 500, in which people died, and one of the things they did was vaping. Now, when you think about it, there's a lot of things that people do, and people drink milk and they die. Now, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but I'm saying that we have to really, if we're being scientific about it, we have to really tease out what the variables are. For example, in one particular case that I read, it's a woman with lung disease who had been very sick. She'd been in and out of hospitals. She vapes. She dies 2 weeks later. Everybody's saying, oh, it's the vaping. But in fact, when you look at all these cases, they don't have a lot in common. Some used vaping for marijuana. Some were electronic cigarettes. Some were flavored. Some were not. Some came from other countries. Some did not. So we have a lot of variables here. It is very, very difficult. From a scientific point of view, it's almost impossible with what we know now to actually isolate what the factor was. Was it an ingredient? Was it an oil? Was it the temperature at which you vaped? You know, there's a huge difference in the metabolites and compounds that are made when you heat an oil to 100 degrees versus 300 degrees, just for example. So there's a lot of variables here. Did they use waxes? Did they use oils? Was it an e-cigarette? Was it a flavoring? And who were the people who were dying? What were their conditions? How could that have impacted it? Is it the vaping, or is it the vaping in a very weakened immune system? We don't know. Let me give you an example. Back in the day, take one that's a little less loaded because it's not current and everybody isn't worried about it right at this minute. But back in the 90s, in New York City, there were a lot of club kids who were being admitted to the hospitals, and it was being linked to ecstasy. Ecstasy is a street drug. If you don't know, it's now called Molly or MDMA, but at the time it was called ecstasy. And there were all these people who were being taken to the hospital. And everybody blamed ecstasy. Oh, they all took ecstasy. But when they started to really analyze what was going on, they found a few other things were going on. For example, most of these kids had been out dancing all night and were very seriously dehydrated. Most of these kids did multi-drug cocktails. They were taking ecstasy, but they were also drinking. Or they were taking ecstasy and they were also doing coke. Or almost all of them were doing ecstasy and alcohol. And dancing all night. And not drinking. And they didn't have the best immune system to begin with. And the dosages were different, and nobody knew what the substance was. There's ecstasy that came from Amsterdam and ecstasy that came from the South Bronx, and nobody knew what was in it and what the ingredients were. So it was relatively impossible to really pinpoint whether it was the ecstasy or some other combination of yet unidentified factors that all seemed to happen at the same time, and it made it look like it was ecstasy. But in fact, we didn't really know that. And further studies decades later, when they actually isolate the active ingredient in ecstasy, which is MDMA, those consequences are not found. when they study it in isolation, in controlled circumstances. So we have a control group and we have a matched group that actually intakes the thing that's being studied, whether it be a pharmaceutical drug or a recreational drug or whatever it is you're testing. You keep everything the same and you just vary that one variable. Then you can make some statements about what is causing what. The fact is, I don't think there's anything good in vaping, whether you're doing an e-cigarette or a flavored cigarette, or whether you're using it as a delivery system for THC. Smoke into the lungs is never a good thing. However, that said, it's a very far cry from saying that to blaming vaping on all these deaths. And then as far as risk goes, you have to think of it this way. We are very, very clear on the risks of cigarette smoking. That's been shown in decades of research over hundreds of thousands of people in every kind of experimental situation you can imagine. Here we have an activity that is probably not good for you and has been associated with a number of deaths. We're not sure if it caused it or if it was a contributing factor, and if it was a contributing factor, what specific part of it was the contributing factor. We don't know that. So for anyone who's thinking, maybe I should just go back to cigarettes, consider this. Suppose you had two oceans or two bodies of water. One of them has got this fish that nobody really understands, and it's a little dangerous, and there have been some rumors that it's attacked people, and there's even a couple of cases where people have died. And the other ocean, the other body of water, is populated with great whites. Like, you got no shot there, okay? We know what's going to happen with the great whites. We're not so sure over here. Before anyone jumps out of this ocean and jumps headfirst into the great white ocean, you might think about risks. This is a known quantity. Cigarettes have like an 800% increase in the risk of lung disease and heart disease. We don't know yet what the whole story is with vaping. I suspect that it will be much like many other things. When we really sort out the variables, we will find that there's a wide variety of quality, a lot of quality control. Some companies really fanatic about the ingredients they use and the testing that they do, and others are not, and they just want to make a buck. Some are imported from China, some aren't. We don't know. Those variables have to be teased out. So my suggestion is don't inhale anything that's hot. I mean, it's obviously better if you don't smoke or vape. But if you have to do one of them, it would be foolhardily to jump from vaping to the ocean of the great whites, which is smoking. What would be a smarter move would be to be really careful about quality control. Not just buy the latest thing or whatever's advertised or what sounds cool or hip or what tastes good, but really investigate and get companies that actually do certificate of analysis. They actually, really care about quality control. Maybe they use organic things. They don't use a lot of chemicals. And there are companies who pride themselves on that. Seek those out, so that at least you're getting the least dangerous version of something that's probably not good for you, but it's definitely not as bad for you as smoking cigarettes. Now, could this all change in a matter of months? Could we have more research? Could we fill in the dots? Absolutely. But for now, my suggestion is, let's not panic. There's 50,000 variables going on in these vaping statistics about people being killed by vaping or vaping being associated with death. Let's find out more. And if you must do one or the other, stick with the vaping, but be really careful about what you vape. This is Jonny Bowden, and I will see you next time. If you like this, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and send in some questions. See you next time.